Well, that's just my game. We play for blood, remember? Yo, that's Rooks G with New Age of the Shadow Moon. Y'all ready for some VAL tonight? We're coming up in a second. Here's Let the Beat Ride. We're going to give him another minute. We're talking about VAL tonight. I got 2 guns, one for each of you. White, I stand corrected. You're on Oak.
Let the beat ride.
Say we were testing the bounds of reality. Yeah, come on. Shouts out to Jason right there and Real John Connor. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Yeah, come on. Rooks G, make sure you sub to Rooks G. How about a spelling contest?
Let the beat ride.
Apparently, Mr. Ringo's an educated man. Now I really hate him. Ajay Korajis. Ajis der Stoltorum. In vino veritas. In pace requiescat. Down by the creek, walking on water. The last ride of Wyatt Earp and his immortals. Why, darling, you're not wearing a bustle. How, dude? Yeah. Come on. What's up, gang? Let's go. That's right. Why, darling, you're not wearing a bustle. How, dude? What's up, gang? What's going on? It's been a minute here. We got a lot to cover, and there's been a lot happening. First, we're going to talk about Val Kilmer, R.I.P. We're going to talk about Val killing it, because I kind of hesitated to do this one. I didn't think I was going to do it, because I love, it's kind of like when you love someone's stuff so much, when you love their performances and all that, and when you love movies, when you love actors, when you were an actor, you kind of, when something like that happens, it's kind of like everybody has their take, and everybody takes ownership of their performances and all that, and that's great. That's fine. So I kind of hesitated because I love Val Kilmer for so long. Really, like since 1984, since I was 4 years old, watching Top Secret. But I thought I would do it because why not? I think I got a pretty good take on Val Kilmer, and we've covered some Val Kilmer here before. We've done Deja Vu, the movie Deja Vu by Tony Scott. We've, of course, covered Heat and Heat 2. And it's interesting, Heat 2's book is right up there. They're making the movie right now. And the book is about Chris Shiherlis, the character that Val Kilmer plays in the film, and his life before and after the events of depicted in the 1995 movie. And so, I thought I would jump into this because I'm going to give kind of a retrospective of Val Kilmer here and what it really means to be a great actor, what that means. Because we all love, I think, I do. We all love movies. I especially love movies, obviously. And so, especially from a kind of not an insider's perspective, but I was a trained actor, and the first thing that comes up in the documentary VAL that he made before he died, the first line in it is Rick Rossovich talking, and he says, "When I was at the Old Vic," he's talking about the Old Vic Theater, but the Old Vic comes off of the Bristol, the Old Vic, and then there's the Bristol Old Vic where I trained, and was founded by Laurence Olivier. Of course, Val Kilmer trained at Juilliard Academy in New York. Juilliard is the American version of an English drama school. And I was really interested I can only make it so far. I also avoided watching the documentary because I thought it would be too much sort of for me to watch. And it kind of is. And I only made it through a portion of his early years before I turned it off. And there's a lot as they say, there's a lot to unpack there. Can you heat that up? Did you guys see the latest Tim Dillon? Can you heat that up? Can you heat that up? I work at Panini. I work at Panera Bread. Can you heat that up? Do you want that heated up? You want that heated up? So we're going to talk about Val and the documentary, which is really highly interesting. And of course, I'm going to talk about his films and what made them great. I also want to do something that seems completely random here, but that is a look at the movie Twister from 1996, because it's a great film. It's as someone stated in the comments, it's a great popcorn flick. And there were 3 great movies in 1996. In the summer of 96, Mission Impossible, Twister, and Independence Day. And what's really amazing is that they've held up so well. And Independence Day really has also, they made a sequel to it. But the movie Twister holds up. There was a sequel or a kind of reboot called Twisters that came out. And I only watched that today. I didn't really want to watch. My problem with Twisters is that it stars the dude from Top Gun Maverick. And what really annoyed me about this one is that I watched an interview with that guy. What's his name? His name is Crimpy McMuffin or something. This dude in the new one. And he's actually not bad, and it's a pretty decent film. But what really annoyed me is that in an interview with him, he said he got the call from Tom Cruise to see if he wanted to be in Top Gun Maverick. And his response was, "Yeah, I got to think about it." I got to think about it. I got to think about it. I got to think about it. You got a call from Tom Cruise and you said, "I got to think about it." You're fired. Never mind. What do you mean? Who are you? You get a call from the one, Tom Cruise, the one, to be in Top Gun Maverick, the movie that saved Hollywood. from the greatest Hollywood person of all time, Tom Cruise, and you got to oh, am I going to think about it? Okay, bro. Whatever. So, yeah, Jethro gives me his name. Glenn Powell. That's apparently his name. Would you like a Chewini? I'm Glenn Beck. So, I'll talk about Twister, the great movie Twister, with Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. And what makes that a great movie. Also, a couple of other things. A lot's been going on. Went to Niagara Falls. I'll talk about the Eastern Sea. Well, I'll talk about the Rust Belt. I'll talk about Lake Erie, the Great Lakes. And also, I read a couple books over the break. Joan Didion's Slouching Toward Bethlehem and C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair, which gives us the band Silverchair from Australia with one hit in the 90s. But that was a pretty sick song that my friend Logan's band used to cover, and they played it better than the original. Also, my friend Paul. Shouts out to my friend Paul because he is producing a podcast. It's called Major Label Debut. You should check it out. It's important to support your friends. Look, man, if your friend starts a business or your friend goes into private practice in law or your friend is, has some brick and mortar place or whatever, then people make a point of supporting that place. You go and you shop. If your friend's wife opens a jewelry store or a magic shop where they sell double-headed quarters and the Luminate Confirmed card game. By the way, the store One-Eyed Jacks in Richmond does not carry the Luminate Confirmed card game, and that sucks. But they do have one of those hand buzzers. When you shake somebody's hand and you buzz the hand. Also, they got double-headed quarters, and they've got a nickel with a nail on it. And I got this in second grade, and I nailed it into the floor, and everybody would always try to pick it up. And I'd go, dumbass. Try harder. It's magic. So, you would make a point of supporting them because they're your friend and they have a business. But I'm supporting here my friend Paul, his podcast, Major Label Debut, with a singer from a band called Tokyo Police Club. And they do videos, interviews with producers, and they did one with Dave Pierner from Soul Asylum, etc. And they interview people. I just did one with the band Mo. And they talk to people in the industry about their music. So that's cool. If you like music, and if you're like a nerd, a music nerd like me, and you like stuff like that, then check it out. And tell them that I sent you. Go to their latest video because they did an interview, and my friend Paul is on there talking about Napster 2.0, and a bunch of other stuff. So check that out and tell them that I sent you. So anyway, I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about Costa Gavras is Missing from 1982 with Jack Lemmon, which is a great movie about Operation Condor in Chile, and whatever else comes up in the meantime. So where should we start? Should we start talking about Val Kilmer? All right, let's talk about Val. So Val was born in 1959, same year as my personal hero, R.I.P., who died on my birthday a few years ago, Norm Macdonald. And Val was, I didn't know this, Val was the son of an industrialist and possible land baron in California. They actually lived at Roy Rogers Ranch when he was a kid. Val famously went on to live in New Mexico, and he played a supporting role in it was a cameo in the movie Missing with Cate Blanchett and Tommy Lee Jones, which is, by the way, the movie Missing, I've mentioned this before, is really underrated as a Western. And Val I think Val ends up being in my opinion, the greatest Western of all time, Tombstone. But he became kind of a cowboy in real life versus the actor that he became in film and theater. And I think it's just interesting that, first of all, as a medium or as a specific genre for the film medium, the Western is not the greatest palette for determining the brilliance of an actor because the parameters of a Western are only so much. Now, we've just covered Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood, which is considered one of the great Westerns. My friend Logan always did not like that movie. He doesn't like Clint Eastwood as a director, but High Plains Drifter and Unforgiven are two great Westerns. And, of course, Clint Eastwood makes that into, he takes the classic Hollywood Western, which is there's a meta aspect to that because, of course, Hollywood is out west, and a lot of the early stuntmen were, like, look at Slim Pickens, were real stuntmen. They were real cowboys. And the sets continued to be in places. I mean, look at Spawn Ranch of all places, which ends up being the home of you guys' personal friend Charlie. Look at your game, girl. What a mad delusion. So it's not the greatest thing for actors to flex their muscles or for a movie to sort of transcend beyond the bounds of its locus. And that's because it is such a specific place where we have rules within the time frame. Now, there are a lot of great Westerns, but that's the reason why you don't see too many Westerns in the list of, like, for instance, the list of the 100 greatest movies ever made, put out by AFI and, whoever else tends to put it out. I looked at the book, the 100 greatest movies ever made, over the break, and it's surprising the number of them that we've covered here. We've covered a big chunk of them. I haven't covered anything what's the John Wayne movie, Stagecoach? Is that it, Stagecoach? Because actually, that was one of the first films that I ever learned to analyze in an academic setting on paper. I was taking a class when I was at prep school on film analysis that was taught by my great director, Maury Hancock, who was my theater director and was one of the most influential people in my life ever. He was so wise and he's a great man. But anyway, he showed us a couple movies, and this was in line with, we were talking about analysis, film analysis, and in order to understand the hero's journey, we read a history of the ancient Near East, and we read Gilgamesh, and somehow we made our way to the film Stagecoach, which we parsed out completely in that class, and of course that's a John Wayne flick, and we have a line of the great actors who came from Westerns. The theme of tonight sort of comes from, strangely enough, Joan Didion's Slouching Toward Bethlehem, because there's an entire chapter on John Wayne, which one of her essays, which I'll get to in a bit. But Val Kilmer is interesting because when Tombstone was made and when it premiered, this was an unexpected movie, and it was an unexpected hit. So Tombstone 1993 is directed by George P. Cosmatos, who, of course, did Rambo and has done a bunch of films, and is also the father of Panos Cosmatos, who did Mandy, which is one of the great films of the last 10 years, of course, with Nick Cage. Also covered the chapter in Guillermo del Toro's series with Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies. Speaking of which, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I finally got to meet Jerry in person. So shouts out to Jerry, because it is important to meet your friends online. Now, this was really special for me because I'm not going to get into how much I wept with joy afterwards. No. But this was really a highlight for me, and I loved it because we're all here on the internet, and especially if you've been around for years, and if you met people, we met through Jay's channel, and I think that this is one of the internet is kind of a middle ground. It can be incredibly harmful, but it can also be it can be a real blessing, and even the even the worst things, God makes the crooked way straight. And I think that God can work miracles, and God's providence allows for really meaningful relationships to happen through this. And I met Jerry, of course, through Jay's channel 5 or 6 years ago, and we have talked on the phone all the time. I've talked about this before, how, I'll often go to Jerry when I'm looking for a take on a profound religious issue or a question that I have. Jerry is a wellspring of knowledge and never pretends to be such, which is sort of why he, it's kind of like in Dune 2. No, that's exactly what he would say, right? And so I got up there, I was in Buffalo, and Jerry pulled up, and we hung out for a couple hours, and it was just very great. And what I'll say is, as Jerry is exactly like he is on his channel at Exposing Powerful Lies. And I asked him, am I the same or am I different? And he said, yeah, exactly the same. So that was funny. So anyway, we took a walk around a park. He showed me parts of Buffalo, showed me this waterfall. I won't get into the whole thing. It was very fun. It was very special. And by the way, the other thing that I posted on Instagram in one of my silly videos was I said that here I am with a statue of Jerry's uncle, and it's a statue of an Indian chief. I wasn't joking. That actually is Jerry's uncle. The only statue of a person at Niagara Falls is Jerry's uncle, and he is Chief Clinton Rickard, who was the founder of the Indian Defense League. And there's a giant statue of him there. Isn't that crazy? That's really, really cool. So anyway, shouts out to Jerry. So what was I talking about? Oh, can I get that up? So check it out. You can Wikipedia it. Look at the statue at Niagara Falls. It's Jerry's uncle. Fuck. I'm getting angry about it. Look it up. Yeah. So anyway, we talked about a bunch of stuff, and that was really cool. And I hope to meet many more of you. Listen, this week, I'm actually going to see Sam Hyde's show, and I'm so pumped for this dude. Again, it's another one of these things where, like, you're on the internet and you watch everything a person does, and you become their close personal friend through they come into your home every week and talk to you. No, but I'm going to go see Sam's show this week. So listen, support me if you want to, if you can, so I can get some merch. I want to get a damn MDE shirt, and they're like $100. So help me out, please. Yeah, because it's worth it. Also, I need a burger. And I'm really dying for a Jamba Juice. I haven't had one since 2004. And I really want a Jamba Juice. Damn, I would kill for a Jamba Juice right now. Do they even exist? Are they even around? I just really want, like... Okay, enough of that. That has nothing to do with anything. Let's talk about VAL. So... Tombstone was by George P. Cosmatos, but actually Kurt Russell is the one who really, I think, filled the director's chair. Now, did you know that Panos Cosmatos financed the movie Mandy through the royalties that his dad got from Tombstone? So that's pretty cool. That's an example of somebody taking something that they created and then investing. Now, I think either his father was in poor health or there was something going on in the movie. Who knows what the truth is, but Kurt Russell ended up pretty much helming the film, and it's one of these films that, Evan, don't be sorry. I thank you for being here, and I appreciate you. And it's one of those examples of a film where it has so many good actors in it, so many famous people, that the tableau ends up creating a really three-dimensional picture of the Old West. And I'm not interested in the facts of the case. I'm not interested in the I'm interested in the facts about the gunfight at the OK Corral and the history of it, just as much as any of the fellows are. But I'm not interested in contrasting it with the film. The films don't. Hey, Mav, thank you so much for. Whoa! Shouts out to you for that $50. 50 gets you an above the belly cutoff tee. Hell yes, muffin tops. Yo, 2025. is Muffin Top Summer. Yo, Muffin Top Summer coming up, boys. Okay. Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate you. Damn, you are the winner tonight. So, do you forget the movie has Charlton Heston in it? It's got Michael Biehn. Michael Biehn, by the way, I was thinking of this the other day. There's another little tangent. We need to find a copy of the movie Cherry Falls. Okay, if you've ever heard of this movie. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream, all these movies were coming out. We've covered Scream. All these were coming out in the mid to late 90s. And all of a sudden, there was a movie called Cherry Falls that was filmed in 1999. And it came out straight to video in 2000. And it has Michael Biehn and Jay Moore. And it's kind of a long legs-esque movie. But the reason we need to watch it is because my friends are extras in the movie. And when you go to the scene with, what's the name of the girl that OD'd and then they said she was poisoned? The girl in 8 Mile. Rolling with the homies. What's that girl's name? What's that actress's name? Somebody will tell me in the chat. She's also in it. When you go to her scene and when you just look it up, 2 of my friends are in the film right there as extras. Anyway, I just thought it would be cool to check that out. Michael Bihn's in that. Michael Biehn, of course, plays Johnny Ringo in Tombstone. And the reason that this movie is so good is because it has Val Kilmer, honestly. And because it has a biblical undercurrent in the film, right? Wyatt Earp's character, Kurt Russell, says that behold a pale horse, right? Behold a pale horse, and him who rides on him is death. And of course, it next cuts to a horse with Wyatt Earp getting off. And of course, later on in the film, when it's not, oh, you make no mistake, it's not revenge he's after, it's the reckoning. When the reckoning occurs, it is because Kurt Russell, Wyatt Earp, has called down hell coming with him. And the reason the film is so good is because of Val. It goes from a two-dimensional thing that you watch on a screen to something that you want to live in. I mean, the movie is endlessly quotable, and that's one of the other strengths, and that's in the writing. That's in the writing of the film. It's incredibly well written. Sam Elliott's in it, of course, Bill Paxton, and Bill Paxton is in Twister, the other movie that I'm going to cover tonight. And R.I.P. Bill Paxton. But the reason the film is great is because Val Kilmer, it makes the movie into something where you want to live in the movie. It's like it invites something for the boys that is, he ends up being both a dilettante and full of violence in the film. So he plays the role with pizzazz. He has some sort of stylistic wonder in the movie, and it's a combination of the costumes and the writing and the overall look of the film. The film takes a lot from early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century film history, and of course begins with Robert Mitchum. And then, Billy Zane's in this movie, also Dana Delaney, totally insane. It has the monologue from Henry V, to die, if not to live, the greater share of honor. It has Dr. Faustus in the film. And there's just a wellspring of cool shit in the movie. It is so fucking good. And this Tombstone is, what I really like about Val Kilmer is I usually don't care about actors' lives in terms of who they are in real life. I think that it's just like with writing. With great movies, with great literature, like I've said a bunch of times, I think that we're not meant to know who the person is. The biography of the person becomes irrelevant at some point. You reach the end of that line. What matters is the thing that they left on paper. In this instance, it's what they left on film. And Val Kilmer sort of plays, he's like sort of outside of that for me because on the one hand, I really don't want to know much about his life because I don't want to spoil anything on the film. But on the other hand, I want to be. I look at that movie and I want to live in the old, in the old West, in the Wild West. Doc Holliday's character is so fucking cool, dude. And what I really love about the film is when I hear Val Kilmer talking about his voice for the movie, he asked for a couple of, you can usually have a dialect coach or an acting coach. I had a dialect teacher when I was at drama school named Gary Ostin, and he was incredible. He's a fantastic, we learned dialect through the phonetic alphabet, and we learned to sort of decipher the dialect of a part by writing it out in the phonetic alphabet symbolism. And so you sort of try and find it's kind of like reading music, which works up to some point, but yeah, Kristen says Wild West too dusty. I agree. I want to live in the Wild West in my mind, but I don't want to go out west with the dust. My home is in the cold, rainy, misty darkness of a normal day in Northern Ireland. Or when I wake up and I see the sun is shining and I go, fuck. I go, oh shit. I go, shit. Saigon. I'm still only in Saigon. I like humidity up to a point until it makes my head hurt when the barometric pressure drops and I go, oh. My head. No. I like cold Viking weather. But I do like the idea of the Old West. And what's really ironic about the film, you realize, is that he's a lunger. He's tubercular in the film, and his voice is one of the things that sells the film. And the great, the hard irony of life is that sometimes the thing that we do is the price that we pay. So it's really tragic in this documentary that Val ends up with his voice taken away. So he got throat cancer, and he said that the cancer was cured. He died of pneumonia, and the cancer was cured, but the radiation treatment is what killed his voice. And that really sucks. I mean, that really sucks, and that's so painful. But I think it's important when these things happen that, like Tennyson said, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. We have to be thankful for the things that we've been given, because it's all going to be taken away at some point, because we live in the world, and there's a fallen world, and there's death, and that sucks. But that's what happens. And so I like that one thing that's really amazing about the documentary Val is that Val Kilmer has a whole warehouse full of his personal films and his videotapes and all of his art. I like how he really embraced his fans, and he wasn't annoyed like Harrison Ford about, I've heard that Harrison Ford now my godfather's met Harrison Ford because they have a mutual best friend. And he said he was pretty cool. But what I've also heard about Harrison Ford, who, by the way, was the one of the roadies for the Doors, and of course Val Kilmer played Jim Morrison, is that what I hear about him is that he gets super annoyed when you mention Star Wars around him, but also is annoyed when you don't acknowledge it. So there's no pleasing him, because all he wants to do is find his family. And for you to get off his plane. That was lame. I'm sorry. That wasn't like a setup. I just was talking. Okay. Give me back my family. I'm in Random Hearts. My name's Dutch. You think Sam talked about that. You think he did that movie because he wanted Reagan's nickname? That was Reagan's nickname. Did you know that? Dutch? Or maybe he wanted to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator because that's his name, Dutch, right? You decided to take the six of us, drop us in the meat grinder. You used to be someone I could trust. Dylan! So, Val Kilmer was very good with his fans. I know that he went to like Comic-Con things and Val, Tombstone stuff, and that's really cool because I take that as an extension of why he got into acting in the first place. And he says in the documentary that, he first played a role in, I think, middle school. He played a theater role, and the audience's response is what sort of drove him to want to do that, to want to make people happy. And I think that's very, very powerful for an actor. I think probably if you're an actor and you don't have that, then that's where we see bad actors or where we see real creeps, because there has to be a joy in the talent that you've been given. And I experienced the same thing when I was in my first real, I was in plays when I was younger, but the first play I was in after a couple years being out of plays that like really affected me, and still it sort of drives something in me today. It was this play called Life on the Bowery, and I played Steve Brody, who was a guy who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge to save somebody, and it was such a great experience in my life. I was in 8th grade. It was a great experience in my life that it made me want to do that in my life. And other things, when I ended up after drama school and working in New York and stuff, made me not want to do it anymore because that's not really what theater or film is. But Val sort of had that. And what happens in the documentary is he goes through talking about his family, and he auditioned for Juilliard, and he was given a place, and he was the youngest person ever accepted to Juilliard. I think he was 16 when he went. And he said that the night before he started, he had a dream about death, and someone in the dream told him I think it was his mother maybe, told him that she was not sad about death because she was happy that she was going to meet her creator. And so the next morning, Val woke up, and his little brother Wesley had passed away. He was 15, and that sort of, I think, it broke his family, and that's all in the documentary. It's pretty heavy. But he went on to talk about drama school, and what I liked about the documentary was that the way he talks about it is exactly the way that drama school is. He points to a figure on the wall, and he says this was one of his teachers, and that she was incredibly hard on him. And that's the way all drama schools have this archetype. They said that on the, they say, exactly, Kristen. I've told you the role. I've told you the story about my friend Angus going to the audition with Spevin Casey. We'll call him Spevin Casey. He went to the Spevin Casey because Spevin Casey was the artistic director at the Old Vic in London, and so he was doing. They were doing auditions. I think he was producing the movie Tigerland with Joel Schumacher. No. Is it Joel Schumacher? Because that's the guy who ended up directing Val in the movie Batman Forever. They said that, I remember reading this at the time, that Val Kilmer set him on fire. So, anyway, they were doing an audition for that film, and my friend Angus went to the audition and was offered a role, but he was told by Spevin Casey that he had to be Skittles to get the role, and my friend Angus said, "Fuck off, poof!" And they told him, "You'll never work again." And he said, "Okay, fine." This is all anyway, which is a great response. And he never worked, and he could have worked because he was made to be a film and TV actor, a professional film and television actor. Merman. He could have done that. He was great. He was fantastic. My friend Angus who was Irish. He's a tour guide now in Ireland, and he's great at that. He's a fantastic dude, very funny, and he was in our group, and he was really, it was really funny training for theater because what you learn in drama school is that we did a lot of training in musical theater. Because if you can do musical theater, you can really do anything, and that's the way all drama school is, but especially at Bristol Vic. And so Angus, I was terrible at it. And Angus was terrible. But what I was told basically was that this was an important lesson in acting. Like, it's all in the face. You sell it in the face, and it doesn't matter what your feet are doing, for example. But Angus we had this lady, Frances Delator, come as stage actress, and she gave this seminar for us. And Angus's questions were very funny. They annoyed her so much, and I annoyed them because we had this seminar on nutrition, and there was question time, and I asked the first question. And it was, well, can we still eat Pop-Tarts? And they said, we're shutting this shit down right now, and they sent everyone home. So that was not good. But, yeah, and I was told that I was such a shit and that I was very difficult to work with, but talented. And I said, so where's the bad part? Right? So you're saying I'm drama school's top guy. I'm drama school's top guy. No. But Angus, when we did film and television training, and we filmed an episode of, what's the show? The Bill. It was The Bill, I think. We did The Bill, which is a show in England. We filmed an episode of that. And Angus was filming for television. And watching him on a monitor, there's a thing you see with actors where, they talk about the camera makes you gain weight or lose weight or whatever. But the camera is something unique. And this is what makes a great actor. You learn the parameters and the limitations of where you are. The theater is much different because it's much bigger. There's much more space. Even though you're in an enclosed space and you have, 3 walls and you've got an audience that you have to pretend is not there, and you're speaking to what they call the gods at the top of the audience. You realize that film and television is something completely different. This is why they say, all actors basically just, you have to learn your lines and hit your mark. That's what they say. But it's much different than that. And your face as a film actor, this is why the 70s has such powerful films, because the auteur era of film with people like Robert Evans, they wanted people whose face had a texture to it and who were not just the kind of people in the 60s in films look, we think of like iconic people in films in the 60s, but their faces do have a kind of airbrushed quality, and that's because of the way that the film stock works much of the time. I mean, even something like Bonanza has that. It looks almost like another world, like a happier world. Seinfeld tried to do this in television, where they said, Seinfeld said we wanted to create the happy universe, basically where all the bad things end up right and nothing really means too much. So you could watch it and it would be kind of mindless, but it was inventive and it's funny, and there's never a serious storyline like there would be with Friends or something. That's what Seinfeld wanted to do. But Bonanza also kind of does that. Bonanza is, this thing, this idea of the Western, which I was talking about earlier, which leads to a lot of the generational momentum at what it means to be a member of society, and also the kind of guy who fits in but also has a kind of outlaw spirit. So that's something that you see in the corporate world a lot, and you also see it in the WASP world, and for instance, in private school, and in finance, and in in law. Oftentimes, especially with boys and men, society and the people that this suits they end up being people that follow rules, and they learn and I'm talking about rules of decorum and rules of manners and rules of what it takes to fit in, kind of invisible rules of what it means to be a gentleman. But part of that is also breaking the rules, and breaking the rules not with impunity, but the kind of person who takes risks. And the risks have to be something that is, so they have to be things that have decorum but are kind of cool. Does that make sense? That's what the idea of that's why Americans love the outlaw. That's why we love the Western. We love, the Man in Black. That's why we love Doc Holliday's character in Tombstone, because he's a former Confederate soldier, and he has this gentlemanly quality of being a kind of antebellum gentleman. He's an antebellum gentleman. He's almost kind of foppish at times. He's a real prima donna, but he fits into the high society of the West. But he's also a card sharp. He's a thief. But like he says in the movie, what does he say? The odds are all in the house. He doesn't gamble. He plays poker. So there are slight variations in this, and some of these characters and some of these films like really do that. The 70s goes for what they said was a kind of ethnic casting, where they got people that seemed real and grittier. We talked about this with Gene Hackman and with Al Pacino and Godfather, and a lot of these guys sort of came out of the 70s. But there's something like when I was talking about my friend Angus, that he had a quality on film that he filled up the screen, and he was interesting to watch. This is the real secret of what it is to be an actor, is that it has nothing to do with motivation. It has nothing to do with it really has nothing to do with how talented you are or how good looking you are or any of that stuff. It has to do with how charismatic you are and how much people want to watch you, because film does something where it takes people it does two things. It either takes a person who's really interesting in real life, and it depletes everything that's interesting about them because they can't be confined to a camera, or it takes a person who is not very interesting in life and makes them very interesting. Someone who there's something subconscious about the way they blink or the way they breathe or the way they move. Benicio del Toro is a great example of this. He's very interesting to watch. Everything he does in a movie is odd. And it's not odd in a purposeful way, because when it's a rehearsed kind of thing, when it's synthetic or superficial, it doesn't seem to work. And a lot of the great, think about the handsome, ugly guys in movies. Like Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is an example of this, because Willem Dafoe, for instance, in The Boondock Saints is a really, it's a cult classic, but it's also pretty tedious as a movie. The main characters aren't even really that interesting, and the storyline tends to repeat itself, and it when you watch it, if you loved this movie when you were younger, just go back and watch it now, because it's not really that great. It just, there's too much. You're waiting for Willem Dafoe to pop up the whole movie. And when Willem Dafoe pops up, he's playing this gay detective. And what's really interesting about him is that he gets gayer as the movie goes on, but it's like he's not trying to be gay. He's not trying to show you that there's an interesting thing for his character. Like, for instance, one of the great things about the movie is you watch it and you notice, if you notice, his character has on these Chelsea boots. You know what Chelsea boots are? Chelsea boots are like boots that zip up on the side. They come out of Chelsea in the swinging 60s. And they're it's pretty cool. But anyway, Willem Dafoe's character wears these Chelsea boots with somehow the heels on them look more pronounced. Like he has heels. And when you watch the film, you'll notice that like the way that he moves and the way he walks seems to be affected by the heels on his boots. And I guarantee you that was a choice that Willem Dafoe made as an actor for his costume. And one thing a great actor will do is they will personally pick their costume and they'll tweak it and they'll move it, and it's kind of like makeup as a first stage actor. The great actors usually learn how to manipulate their costume and their makeup for something for the character, and Willem Dafoe kind of does this in the movie, and he is way too good for the movie. He's the ugliest dude, but he's also the handsomest dude. When you look at, do you get what I'm saying? Like he's very, very cool to look at. And think of him in Platoon. Platoon's another movie, by the way, that Val Kilmer auditioned for. There's a lot in the documentary that we learn about his audition tapes. Val Kilmer should have been in Full Metal Jacket. My problem with Full Metal Jacket has always been Matthew Modine as an actor. I get why he was chosen for the film, and we've done Full Metal Jacket, but there's something that I've always wondered how Matthew Modine got into movies, because he's playing the kind of straight man in the film, and that's his role, but he's too ordinary in the movie for me to get into. And Val Kilmer would have been this. I mean, it would have been a different part. It would have been something that Stanley Kubrick wasn't looking for, but it would have been pretty cool. He also auditioned for the part of Henry Hill in Goodfellas. He basically, Val, what you learn about the Doors movie, by the way, is that Val's audition tapes that he made, and he made like films for his audition tapes. An actor will often, create a show reel or make audition tapes. The most famous audition tape is, oh God, I can't remember it now. It's the one for Pony Boy. I'll have to think of that one. That one's like the classic audition tape for Pony Boy. Anyway, so Val made these films because his younger brother could have been a great filmmaker before he died. And they made all of these films together as kids, these three brothers. And what you learn about the Doors is that like Val's audition tape basically became, thank you, Clown, The Outsiders, which I've covered The Outsiders, is what became the Doors movie. I mean, Oliver Stone, like either there was a weird synchronicity in how they filmed the movie, or he really literally looked at Val's audition tape and said, this is the movie I want to make. And it's really cool. He says that, there was no option that he wasn't going to play Jim Morrison. And that's obviously his iconic movie. Now, I'm not really going to do a full Doors analysis here because that's kind of outside of our time right here. But the Doors movie, I mean, anybody who watches this channel knows what I think, how much I love the Doors since I was a little kid. I always will. And I've read every book about Jim Morrison, and I've read every Doors book. And one of the problems that the band had with the Doors movie, which I like this, is they said, this is not the way Jim was. And Oliver Stone's reaction, I love this. Oliver Stone's reaction was, I don't care. This is how I see Jim. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning about fact versus truth. This is also a Norm Macdonald thing, right? We covered his book. And it's may not be factual, but it's more truthful. And it's certainly truthful in terms of his Oliver Stone's vision as an artist. This is what Jim Morrison meant to him, or how he sees him in the 60s. Oliver Stone wrote a book called A Child's Night Dream that came out in, I think, 1998 that I lost. It's gone now, but it's a kind of look into Oliver Stone as a Jim Morrison type of soldier Oliver Stone was in Vietnam. And yeah, Sabrina says, No One Here Gets Out Alive by Danny Sugarman. Read it in high school. I had to hear their music. Danny Sugarman, by the way, also wrote a book called Wonderland Avenue. And that book is about The Wonderland Murders, and another great Val movie you guys you probably don't remember is the 2005 movie Wonderland, where he plays John Holmes. Do you remember that? It's actually a pretty decent movie. It's a well done flick, and it was a kind of resurgence of Val Kilmer as an actor going into the 2000s, because after that Val started doing roles that clearly were lesser than, but were it's kind of this Bruce Willis thing where I can tell when an actor is doing films that people think, why are they doing these shitty films, but it's just work, and it's clearly so that they can build up like a trust fund, for example, for their kids, or they can build up capital and finance their kids for the rest of their lives, which I think is noble. That's a great thing. But Danny Sugarman also wrote a biography of Guns N' Roses. I have a signed copy in the other room. Danny Sugarman died, I think not too long ago. Sugarman was also a kind of better version model for the Cameron Crowe character in Almost Famous. This is why I hate the movie Almost Famous, because I don't like the fake band in the movie. I don't like Cameron Crowe. I like the movie Jerry Maguire because that's Tom Cruise, but I've never really liked Cameron Crowe. He's too sentimental, and the character that he plays in Almost Famous is basically Danny Sugarman. Now he really was that for Rolling Stone, but Danny Sugarman was also this. And when Jim died, Danny Sugarman was in a relationship with Pamela Corson, who then OD'd 3 years later. She was also in the film The Doors. There's a scene where she is shooting up with this Italian count, and Val walks in, Jim Morrison walks in and says, "Oh, did I interrupt you?" And that Italian count was a real character, and he was the heroin dealer to the stars that Keith Richards talks about in his book Exile on Main Street, about the making of that album, where they rented out a villa in the south of France that was a former Gestapo headquarters with a torture facility in the basement. And he was, they had this deal with this guy, this count, who was a kind of middleman between the Marseille gangsters and the Golden Triangle, bringing in pink tie heroin from the Golden Triangle. And this was the guy. Later, he dated Marianne Faithfull, and Marianne Faithfull is the one who, and she died also not too long ago. And she said in an interview, you can look this up on YouTube, Marianne Faithfull says, no, Jim didn't. He died of heart failure when he was 27, but no 27-year-old dies of heart failure. And she was there to confirm basically that he had OD'd. And he OD'd from buying it at this place called the Rock and Roll Circus in Paris, which was owned by the Rolling Stones. So there's a kind of circle here. But that Italian count was her boyfriend, and he's the one who sold it to him. So there's a thing. Also, one more thing about Danny Sugarman. Danny Sugarman's girlfriend was that girl not Fawn Leibowitz, Fawn something. She was one of the witnesses in the Iran-Contra affair, because she was the personal secretary of Oliver North, and she was one of the people who was shredding documents. So that's really wild. You want to hear another? You want to hear another Iran-Contra affair? Very wild tie-in, because this is hilarious. So I went to my friend's dad's funeral. Rest in peace. Great man. This past Saturday. And I got to hang out with one of my oldest friends, who is one of the most based and smartest people I've ever known. We've been friends since we were in preschool. And he was pen pals with Larry Nichols, first of all, and also wrote a book on blockchain. He's one of the authorities on blockchain. He's in finance. And when we were, the way I always thought it was this, but he corrected me on the story, because he's got a guest house in the back. And when we were younger, I seem to remember in my mind that there was this man walking around who didn't live there. He lived in the guest house out back, behind my friend's house. And we would say, "Who's that man?" Well, that man that lived in my friend's guest house was John Tower. And John Tower was the chairman of the Iran-Contra committee. He was John McCain was his protege. And then he also, the picture of the church hearings, the church committee hearings in 1978 with Senator. If you look at the picture of Senator Frank Church and he's holding up the heart attack gun, the guy next to him is John Tower, the guy who lived in the back of my friend's house. So, anyway, he passed away in mysterious circumstances in a plane crash. So that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about Val Kilmer. So, because that all came from The Doors and Danny Sugarman. So thank you, Sabrina, for getting me on that tangent. Tombstone's great. The first movie that Val Kilmer was in was 1984's Top Secret. He went on to be in, he was in Real Genius. I think that was 1986, maybe. And then, or 1985 was Real Genius. And then in 1986, he was in the movie that changed his life, one of the great movies of all time, which is Top Gun. And he played Iceman, of course. And what's really great about the movie Top Gun is Val Kilmer's character provides a real counterpoint to Maverick's character in the movie. And I've always liked this movie because it does something unique in Hollywood. We covered this with High Concept and Don Simpson, but this is great because it's like Rocky. What happens is that the protagonist of the movie does not win. Val Kilmer, who is Iceman, wins the movie. He is the Top Gun. Remember, Maverick is not Top Gun. It's Iceman, Val Kilmer's character. I think people kind of forget that in the movie. And the reason that it's great is because Val Kilmer is playing the absolute top dog. He's playing the alpha in the movie who plays by the rules, and he says to Maverick, "I don't like you because you're dangerous." Remember that great line? Now, this is a Don Simpson, Jerry Bruckheimer movie, you can tell, because it has the same sort of MO as Crimson Tide and all of their other films, which is basically you get there's a kind of this is why Quentin Tarantino went on his homoerotic thing about the movie, because you get a bunch of sweaty guys and you put them in planes and that's the movie. The same thing happened with Crimson Tide, which is where they said, let's do the same thing. Let's get dudes who are even sweatier, and we're going to put them in a sub, and then one's going to be black and one's white, so that makes it more special. And that there also be a kind of father figure struggle here. And in the end, the thing that they're afraid of that they know is not going to happen doesn't happen. So there's kind of not really a point. The point is the human drama. And Val Kilmer, first of all, Tom Cruise is beyond. The Quentin Tarantino thing is funny, but it's also, it's kind of reached past, it's jumped the shark. We've gone past that. And Tom Cruise is sort of above all that kind of shit. But Val Kilmer is playing this character who is a winner. He's going to win in the movie. And you need that, especially in an 80s film with so much MIC propaganda and all this stuff. That's all part of it, and the recruitment aspect of it, and the Ray-Ban, it's a Ray-Ban movie and all that. But really, it's the human drama in the movie. And this is also what takes us into, it's going to be a kind of bridge for when I talk about Twister, because what you really need in films to make films great is you need to have the kind of unexpected tragedy of a character realizing their own limitations and their own death. And it's not just that I'm not saying it's like, oh, we realize that someone is driven by the loss of their father, like Tom Cruise is in it. That's not really even what the movie is. The movie is about Tom Cruise coming to grips with his own limitations and pushing past the bounds of reality, as Val says with Jim Morrison in The Doors. But Val Kilmer's character in in Top Gun is so great because he pretty much plays it straight. And there's also there's it's interesting because Maverick, he says that Maverick is the dangerous character, but it's really Val Kilmer's character who is the dangerous one because he's going to win. He's going to win. And if the movie is about the propaganda pushing the United States through the Cold War as the top dog in the 80s, then you need characters who are going to win. The enemy, they have to know that we're going to win. And that's why you have Val Kilmer's character in there. Now, Tom Cruise's character is the kind of guy that I was talking about earlier with the sort of guy who plays by the rules but breaks the rules but then makes good on them because he takes risks. But Val Kilmer's character doesn't do that in the film. We go on, he did a bunch of other movies. He did a great movie called The Real McCoy with Kim Basinger. He was in Kill Me Again. He's done really every one of his films up to a point was fantastic. Thunderheart is great. But Tombstone and The Doors is really where he broke on through the other side, as they say. And the reason that The Doors is great with Jim Morrison, with Val's Jim Morrison, is because the Rolling Stone cover that preceded this was Jim Morrison. He's hot, he's sexy, he's dead. And I think that was a 1980 Rolling Stone cover, and it sort of leads to what the Doors have done with their discography and their sort of branding post-Jim. What I hate about the Doors is that when Jim died, they continued on as a band. I hate it when bands do this. I'm glad that Led Zeppelin didn't do that. They stopped. Now, they went on tour years and years later, but it was with Jason Bonham, so that's fine. But they sort of tried to market this thing, and this is kind of like what, when in the movie, when they're watching, when they're in the studio, and Val sees the Doors commercial. There's a Ford commercial on the television, and they're singing "Light My Fire," which is a song written by Robbie Krieger, not Jim. And they say "ba da ba 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 ba," and he throws the TV through the studio window, and he says "catchy tune." Basically, Jim never needed to. I see their point because they needed to sell out. They have families, and they needed commercial money. But Jim was never going to do that because he was already part of a military establishment family with his father, right? Admiral Morrison, who, of course, as they say in the movie, was at the Gulf of Tonkin. He was the admiral in charge of the first shots at Vietnam. Now, there is some theory about Jim being S-sided as a result of that somehow, but I don't think that's true. I think the story with Jim probably is that he actually was just a lot of the control over his image was done through Jerry Hopkins, who wrote No One Here Gets Out Alive with Danny Sugarman, and Jim was made to do these commercials, these anti-drug commercials in the 60s, and he kind of blew them up like Norm did when he was doing his live reads. He purposely fucked them up, and I think that part of this is that the image that they did when they controlled it was they this is what led to the speculation about him faking his own death and all this bullshit, because they couldn't find the guy. There was no autopsy, and they said he died of heart failure at 27. Well, thank you, Crispy. Really appreciate that. Well, I think that Jim probably was not the guy on acid like they said that he was. He certainly did that. And he's one of these, the inspiration for the name came from Aldous Huxley, right? When the doors and that came through William Blake. When the doors of perception of things are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are, infinite. That's in William Blake's Proverbs from Hell. And of course, the doors of perception was written by Aldous Huxley. Jim was at UCLA Film School when he came up with the title, which is where Francis Ford Coppola and John Milius met Jim, and that's why they use the Doors' "The End" song as the bookend for Apocalypse Now. But I think that Jim was probably just a heroin. I think he was a heroin addict through the 60s because he was in a relationship. Now, there's literally nothing to substantiate that in books because all of their stuff is so tightly controlled. You know, if you're a Doors fan, this is the thing that annoyed Conan O'Brien about the Doors was that the Doors fan tends to be kind of like a Tool fan, kind of like any very specific. And Tool actually has a kind of line from the Doors, just like a Velvet Underground or kind of a New York Doors. But there's a kind of thing about Doors fans, and I certainly fit into that category. But they are very controlling of their music and their back catalog and their image. And there's something admirable about that, about creating and controlling your artistic medium and everything that you've put out, your content control. But I think that's sort of, to me, that seems like a lie when we come to talking about Jim. Because look, any film of Jim Morrison singing, like at the Hollywood Bowl or in Dance on Fire, the documentary, or in Strange Days, any of the documentaries or any of the concert footage of Jim is always put down to him closing his eyes on stage as being on acid and drunk. And I think that he certainly was a drinker. I mean, that's where the LA Woman came out. LA Woman album came out of his sort of bluesy soul and his drinking. But I think that he was probably just I think that he was also probably closing his eyes because he was nodding, and he was probably not. I've never seen anybody on acid closing their eyes all the time. All you see is marble eyes. So I don't know. That's just my theory about it. That's what I think. But Jim, Val played him very, very well. And another thing that he did in the film is that became something to make movies about. This changed the way that movies are made. Is that usually in a biopic of a music figure, and there are too many of them. There are too many music biopics. I haven't seen the one about Elton John. I'm not really interested in watching it, and I haven't even seen the one about Freddie Mercury. I'm not really interested in that either. I like the music, but I just know that there is this image of of musicians, and it's not making musicians into saints. That's not what the movies do. They make them into saints. They make them into a kind of saint of ugliness in movies, but they actually don't get the things that they did. So there's this weird. It's like a limited hangout for music biopics. You take the things that the musician did, and you show them struggling, but the struggle is not really the struggle that they went through. So, for example, the Elvis movie with Austin Butler. Oh, hey, I'm gonna keep the home fires burning, little mama. The movie's good because it's very factual in terms of how it shows Elvis, and he as an actor is really good, and he plays it pretty straight in terms of, I've seen every Elvis footage there is, and when I watched the movie, I said that is accurate. That's accurate on stage. But if you read Nick Gerelnick's Careless Love, that is not really who Elvis was. That's the whole point. The whole point of Elvis is that he gives everything to music. He gives everything to the songs that he sings. But there's also a kind of playful humor that he has, because part of his this is something that happens with artists. Artists will often give everything that they have, and they self-destruct. They self-destruct because they reach their limitations, and they want to move beyond that, and they want to be sort of high all the time. And I don't mean even just literally with drugs. That's often a thing that serves as an anodyne with great artists. But it's like the artist lives for shedding their blood on paper or on film. And so The moments outside of that there's a vacuum effect, and they have to deal with the pain of living. It's like there's a great line in The Doors that Val utters where he says he's always wanted to be like Erich von Stroheim in the movies, the man you love to hate, the joke the gods played on me. I've always seen myself as a kind gentleman with the soul of a clown, which forces me to blow it at the most inopportune moments. That's who Jim was. That's who Elvis was. And what's great about Val Kilmer playing in this movie is that he is not Jim Morrison. He's clearly, as a person, I would expect him not to be Jim Morrison. But there's a great part in the documentary which has I just watched this. He's rehearsing Hamlet, and he's at drama school. And it's being filmed. I mean, Val was like the first person with a video camera, and he basically filmed everything that he did. He was like the original live streamer, but he had a film of his whole life, and he has a gigantic warehouse with everything in it. And there's a film of him analyzing the script, analyzing the text for Hamlet. Oh, this too solid flesh. Right, and he's talking to the director, and the director says, why did your physical movements get so shaky when you were doing that? And Val says, because he sits down and he says, I don't know what it's like to think those thoughts because I've never thought them in my real life. And the director, and I love this in the movie, this is a real director. This is really what theater and film is. The director says, basically, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. The whole point of the actor is that you have the capacity to have thought those thoughts. You can't, it doesn't matter what you did in your real life. The line between the actor and the act, as Val states, is that the audience has to see beyond truth in the art so that they see themselves on stage. And it's supposed to be ugly or beautiful or whatever it is, but they see themselves in the film. It can be. This is why Harold Bloom wrote the Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. Because Shakespeare has this quality in his writing. You can have an old woman and you are a young man, like Henny, young man, is an old man. And Gary, old man, is a young man. Gary Mann is just some guy who works at Comedy Central. Well, you can be a young man watching a play or a film, and there's an old woman, and you are nothing like her. Your lives can be different. She's rich, you're poor. She's white, you're black, you're whatever. It can be completely different. But there is a shared human experience. There's a thing, there's a concept, there's a thing that we all share in humanity, and we understand that as human beings. And so this director is talking to him and telling him, you got to get with it. You've got to understand that when you think those thoughts as the character, those are your thoughts. And that's what makes a great actor. Great actors are not people who react. They're not even people, as Michael Caine says, who listen. Great actors are people that lose themselves in wanting to be someone else. It's not just that they become someone else or they do all this preparation or they reach inside themselves for something. It's that the great actor finds that the words that they speak and the thoughts that they think become their own and that they want to be that person. And it can be someone who is complete. There's nothing that's the same about you, but the actor wants to inhabit this because no matter what you do when you're an actor, you're never going to be that person. You're going to walk off the set, you're going to walk off the stage, you're going to continue to live your life, but there should be a part of you, there should be a thing in you that feels like it's painful. It should be something that rips you away when you realize you're not that person. That's what a great actor is. And I think that Val Kilmer really had that. I mean, because he doesn't have the thing that the people had in the 70s that I was mentioning. He doesn't have this craggly face. He doesn't have a face like you can read the mountains with. You know, he's a very like good-looking guy. He could sing, he could act, he could play all these roles, and he could he could put on a face that seems totally different, a persona. You know, when he plays Val Kilmer, it's totally different from Jim Morrison. And then when he goes into The Saint, which is The Saint is probably one of my favorite Val Kilmer movies because The Saint is like a meta version of him, what he's already doing. He's playing different characters, and he does. Remember, in the movie, he actually doesn't ever say who he really is. There's one line at the beginning where he says, "I'm John Rossi," but the rest of the movie, he has all these different names. He's Martin de Porres. He's Thomas More. He's all these saints. Hence the title of the movie. But who is he really? He really doesn't know who he is, and he's sort of. There are moments of clarity in the movie. Like there's a scene in The Saint where he is in the train station with Elizabeth Shue, and he's all of a sudden decided they're going to live together. They're going to run away together. They're going to live off selling her cold fusion thing. And this is very good. It's by Philip Noyce. He's the director. What he does is Val Kilmer opens the locker, and the locker opens in Elizabeth Shue's face, and so. Unintentionally, he's blocked her from the future. He's reaching into the locker, which is where he keeps all of his stuff. And what it's showing in the movie is that he actually doesn't have any. The character is a thief, and he steals other people, and he steals their identity, and he doesn't have anything inside of himself. So he has to reach into a physical locker to reach inside of himself. That's where his identity is. And by doing that, he opens the door, and he shuts it right in her face, and so she runs away. So to redeem himself in the movie, he tries to do what every saint would do and perform 3 miracles. And he ends up saving the day in the end. And it's a great movie because in the end we see that the way he finds himself is by drink your wine, is by finding someone to be in love with. So it's a sort of classical Hollywood movie in the end because love is what his love for this woman is what saves him. He finds that he can give, and it's not just about self-service. He can actually he can get by giving. So there's a kind of undertone in the movie that leads to him finding himself through an idea of Christian redemption. But Val Kilmer is great in the movie because he plays it with a kind of whimsy and sense of humor that I think a lot of other actors would not do. Remember that he's in Port of Call, New Orleans. He's a supporting character in that with Nick Cage, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call. Give me the kibble. Give me the kibble. He was in Spartan. He was in The Missing, as I said. Prince of Egypt. Prince of Egypt was one of his, real John Connor. I forgot Val was the voice of Moses in Prince of Egypt. He's the voice of Moses and God in the movie. And Val Kilmer was a Christian Scientist, and he got this from his mother. What I really like about the documentary is that he shows his family so much, and clearly this is something very normal about his life that was really beautiful because his son does his voice, and Jack Kilmer does his voice in the documentary because Val can't speak, and Jack Kilmer clearly loves it. They clearly love each other. They're a great father and son. Val went to all of his son's concerts. He's a musician. He was an actor in the movie Palo Alto, I think. He's also a model for Yves Saint Laurent. But he looks a lot like his father, and I love it, like when they're riding around in a cab together and he's at his concerts and he's watching him play guitar. There's a great scene in the movie where his son is playing a guitar on stage, like rehearsing or just fooling around, and it's really bad. He's actually playing guitar really badly, and you imagine, because I was in a band, and I imagine myself playing music and playing guitar for my dad, and anybody who's been in a teenage band with your parents just hate it. They hate it, but they also love it. They love. My parents always told me how awesome it was, and they never told me to turn it down. They put up with it because they like seeing their children have fun and express themselves and do something that they think is cool. And that I think that you can see the joy on his face when he's watching his son play guitar badly on the set. It's just really, I think that's really cool. There's something very ordinary and beautiful about that. But his movies are just really fantastic, and I think it's it's obviously a great loss, but we're all gonna go. So anyway, that's about all I have to say about Val Kilmer. He was a great actor because he really. I think he did the thing in movies that the great actors do, which is leave their life behind on film. And what creepy actors do, what bad actors do, creepy and bad. There can be good actors who are creepy, but what they do is live forever young on the screen, and that's something that's obviously tied into the kind of Kenneth Anger version of the star. Joan Didion talks about this in Slouching Toward Bethlehem. So let's do a little sideline in Slouching Toward Bethlehem. Listen, if you want to support me also, please, you can send a super chat. I want to give a shout out to Ethan, by the way, who also supported me on my vacation while I was gone. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Jason and shouts out to Real John Connor for both supporting me on PayPal and Cash App. You can hit the links right there in the video description, and you can also let's see. Here's a link. You can also hit the links. Right there, pinned, and you can support me. Please help me to. Is it the Bill Burr? Is it the burger or the hot dog? Which one is it? The burger or the hot dog? Which one? Which one should I get? Shut the fuck up, Bill Burr. Excuse my language, folks. Also, little plug here. I'll be doing a True Detective analysis on Friday with our good friend Maddie at The Real Cooter Brown. Please check out the stream that I did with Jamie. We did, I thought that was really fun. That was one of my most fun streams that we've done on her channel, Jamie Henshaw. Please look at our stream that we did on basically advice for young people and some things for men. She did some great things on how women can be women and ladies. And I did some things for the fellas and the dudes. So please check that out. Yes, Crispy. Please follow Crispy's advice and please send me some Red Bull money quickly. Thank you so much. Let's see. Let's talk about Joan Didion a little bit. If you don't know who Joan Didion is, she wrote the book Slouching Toward Bethlehem, which is from William Butler Yeats's The Second Coming. It's a quote from that. Joan Didion is, and I don't have the books in front of me because I read them while I was away and they weren't mine, so I didn't bring them here because they're not my books. So I'm just going to do this from memory. Joan Didion's book, Slouching Toward Bethlehem, is a 1960s book essentially about sun-soaked California and what that means in a generational sense and for America. And it provides a kind of overriding theme for tonight because we're talking about movies and actors and I'd say the kind of counterpoint to that would be C.S. Lewis's Silver Chair, which I also read. And what is interesting about Joan Didion is that Joan Didion is a kind of formative essayist in the 1960s and really still provides a kind of tonal, a kind of monolithic tonal point for cultural writers even today. Like when you read any kind of blog or you read Screen Rant or you read any kind of anything dealing with film or culture now, especially like in the Atlantic, if anyone reads that anymore, when you read these things, when you read pieces by writers on culture, there's still something in the tone and even in the sentence structure that comes from Joan Didion. And my problem with her book is that and this is something that I think can only be seen in hindsight, is that we begin to look at the 60s as this kind of time in America that has a kind of righteous fallibility, and it's basically like California is go west, young man. California is the end point of America, and it's this place where it's both full of possibility. Well, it's full of possibility, which can mean possibility for liberation in the Crowleyan sense. People can do kind of whatever they want, and they can fill their dreams. But there's also, on the other side of the sunshine, there's this kind of underlying, really Stygian darkness, as Norm says. And the book begins with a tale of a murder. And a kind of domestic situation, going into a series of essays about, basically it reads like a kind of book about cults. And this doesn't mean just the kind of cult that we know about, whether it's the John of God cult or the Manson cult, any of those things, the Solar Temple. It's not even that. It's like the cult of celebrity, the cult of suburbia, the cult of Reaganite conservatism, the cult of neoliberalism, all of these things sort of end up as cults where in the writing of Joan Didion, people end up fully invested in giving their thing, whatever the thing is, a kind of religious iconography and a religious devotion. And it exists only as a shadow of what they could find in Christianity and goodness. And we all devote ourselves to things, we all devote ourselves to sin in a way, but it takes on a kind of cultural hegemony in Joan Didion. And one of the best examples of this actually is, thank you, Sabrina, and I'll get to your super chat in a second, is how when she discusses John Wayne. So there's an essay, there's a great essay, a very famous essay on John Wayne, and she basically says, and this is pretty accurate, that John Wayne on set was she says John Wayne as a person was so full of sexual potency that it's like oozing out of his pores. And she says that he's really the first actor, and this is probably true. He was the first actor who went from being he wasn't an actor anymore. He was a star. Now, Kenneth Anger talks about this in Hollywood Babylon and the golden age of Hollywood and the dark side and the stars. For instance, with Fatty Arbuckle and Rudolph Valentino and Mae West and a bunch of these stars who, a lot of them were opium addicts, or they were speedball addicts in the 20s, and all this stuff. There was murder and mayhem. People, Jane Mansfield. It ends up with Jane Mansfield and Temple of Satan and all this stuff. But John Wayne is an interesting case study because John Wayne, I've always thought, appears extremely fey in a lot of his movies. There's a way that he walks, and everybody sort of knows this. He walks with, and the way he slaps people in his movies is he's playing the top dog and he's a cowboy, but there's a kind of thing that he portrays as a strut with swagger, but ends up being kind of fey. Does that make sense? And I think that's actually, for most people, unconsciously part of his appeal. It's always annoyed me about John Wayne. And I like John Wayne movies, but I think that sort of sets the stage for how we think and how we read about characters. I think there needs to be, if there's anything, there needs to be, and there's been a lot of this in the past few years, a kind of revamping, a look back at a lot of the things that people have held dear in terms of the Americana on film that needs to be sort of looked at again. So, for example, the movie Twister. Let's move into the movie Twister. The movie Twister is a great film. It is a great film. It's a popcorn film. It's as Jerry Bruckheimer would say, I went to the cinema and I watched Twister and it was great. I laughed, I cried, and my goal is to put people in the seats. And Tom Cruise is, and he goes into talking about Tom Cruise. But Twister's great because I've always liked this movie because I saw it in summer of 1996. And so it was Mission Impossible and then Twister and then Independence Day. And this is what I love about movies. In the summer of 1996, I was at a personal low point in my life because of whatever. But there was we all go through kind of ups and downs. And that was a very difficult time for me, a very difficult summer. And that wasn't really a thing that I told anybody. It wasn't even a thing to tell anyone. I was learning how to be a man and that's not really, I just didn't, it's just a thing that we grow up, we often you don't need to share things about like, things are hard or whatever. It's kind of different from now where everybody has to talk about how hard things are all the time. But it was a difficult time. But one of the things that I did was I would always go to the movies with my dad. And my dad took me to all of these movies. And that was like, I look back on that time as like a golden time because, and I think this is a good lesson for myself and this is how we kind of look at things. Oftentimes, the worst times end up with this secret blessing that we have where we can look back on them and all the bad parts are kind of thrown out the window and we just remember the good parts. And so I remember looking back on that. I've been thinking about that because of my friend's dad passing away. But we look back on that and it was just my dad and I going to the movies and it was just really cool. It was just a cool thing that we always used to do, and it was like, hey, let's go see the movie. We went to see the movie and that's it. And it was awesome. And I remember the experience of the movie even more than I remember the movie. But Twister was a great movie because this was the first time that, at least for me, that CGI really came into the common parlance, as Alex says. And the scenes with the cow floating in the Twister and all that stuff, people, critics had a real hard time with this, but that doesn't matter. Now CGI has changed since then, and it really, again, reached its point in extremis. I mean, the computer graphics on screen really started to really detract from movies, and now we're seeing. That's what my point was with Dune 2, the Dune 2 analysis, that Dune 2 changes. It's not even green screen anymore. It changed because it was blue screen, CGI, and then green screen, and now it's going into something different, I hope. But the CGI in that movie, Phone Punk, it holds up because you have to have a suspension of disbelief when you watch the movie, and there's no real stars in the movie. That's what was crazy about it, because all the other movies had these big stars. Mission Impossible has Tom Cruise in it, and I remember getting out of my exam and going to see Mission Impossible on opening day, and it was just fucking so sick, dude. And I will definitely go see the new one when it comes out. I'm also going to see that movie Warfare. The last movie that I reviewed from Alex Garland, or that I analyzed from Alex Garland, was not great, Civil War. And that was a real disappointment because I like Alex Garland. We covered The Beach. I did a literary analysis of the movie. We've talked about Ex Machina. I've talked about Devs. I did that on the members channel. You can grab a membership if you want to. I will be doing more membership videos, membership streams for the members only, because I just haven't. The last month has been really, really tight. Speaking of which, before I forget, I do have a stream coming up, an interview with an old friend of mine who is a Hollywood insider. And she has a big podcast that she has made. She produced it, she wrote it, and Owen Wilson and Sissy Spacek are in the podcast. They do the voices, and they're making a movie of it right now. So it'll be interesting for us to do an interview with her before the movie gets made and before it gets big, because it'll be a thing. And she's an old friend of mine, a person who's been in the movie industry for a long time. So that's coming up in about 2 weeks. But Twister is great because Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt. It's got Alan Ruck, right? Cameron from Let My Cameron Go from Ferris Bueller, and yes, Banhammer Annihilation is definitely weird. I've been waiting to do an Annihilation analysis. I need to read the book before I do the film analysis, so we'll be doing that sometime in the future. But what was I going to say? Oh, Bill Paxton's in the movie. R.I.P. Bill Paxton, and of course the great Philip Seymour Hoffman. Food. This is a great film. The movie holds up. It's a great summer film. And it really, people forget also that it really gave us the natural disaster film that we still see. All that Sharknado bullshit and all the kind of, snakes on a plane and all that kind of stuff. All that is derivative of Twister. Twister is the thing. And the reason this movie is great is because the movie's about the tornado, the physical tornado, but it's really about the tornado of life. It's about the tornado of life and love. And we get two characters who were together and are spinning apart and who end up brought together in love at the end of the movie. And aside from their common interests in being tornadoologists or whatever, tornadologist, a twisterologist. Aside from that, we get two characters who realize that they need each other, and this is a really beautiful thing. Now, here's what would have made the movie better. Check this out. Helen Hunt is obsessed with the tornado because at the beginning of the film, she goes into the storm shelter and her family comes down and they get safe just in time. And her dad is whisked away by the Wizard of Oz. Okay. Now, she says to Bill Paxton later on in the great moment in the movie that you've never seen a thing skip every house and every person and come right after you. And she wants to figure out this thing to try and help other people and help science and all this shit, but also to understand, to try and kind of fill up the hole that the tornado has left in her heart where it took her dad away. But what would have made the movie better is if it had hit every other house and skipped her. Because then it would make it a kind of selfless act with her, with survivor's guilt. And I think that's a different kind of, maybe that's a different kind of movie, but it would make it so that the character doesn't understand this thing and why she was spared. And that seems to be more indicative of life on a deeper level than to look for why something happened to you. So instead of wondering why something happened to you and not anybody else, why not make it about why something happened to everyone else and not you? And especially make it negative. Because the way the movie is, she's trying to fill up the hole in her heart with the storm, and it ends up that she doesn't need a man in the movie. She kind of makes clear, but then she ends up with the man. But instead, what would have happened is she would have realized that the man that she loves is the guy who can help her heal the hole in her heart from being spared. Does that make sense? I think that would have been a different, kind of better movie. But that doesn't mean that the movie is bad. The movie is great. It's really great because again, we get this cast of characters who, first of all, the tornado nerds are cool. There's always something cool about a group of people who have a common interest in a thing, and they have a community. They're the tornado community. And wherever they go, they are having a good time. They're enjoying each other's company, and they look like sort of 90s misfits, but they're led by a top dog. They're led by an alpha dog. They're led by Bill Paxton, and he's fucking cool in the movie. He's cool because he's all about the tornado and his science experiment, but it's almost like the character sort of happened into this. Like, he's really good at this thing, but it's actually being with the group and finding the woman that he loves that really makes him the leader. So they always know they can look to him for leadership, for inspiration, for a kind of solidity. And I watched the reboot today, or the sequel, Twisters, and of course it's got Clonstein McMuffin or whatever his name is, and he actually does this pretty well in the movie. I like that but they play it too hard. These are these guys who don't care about anything, but it turns out he's a YouTuber, and they shoot up fireworks into the tornado, and all the stuff that he all the stuff that he's doing is actually just to save the people in the town. Like, he's going around like he's some kind of saint, which is great that he's giving back to all these people, and he saves people in the movie, and that's cool. And he likes this girl. And that's refreshing in a movie to see two normal people who want to love each other. That's really cool. But they play it too hard because they play it too hard that they're unlikable, but then they are secretly likable. In Twister, the people are never unlikable. They're always likable. Philip Seymour Hoffman, for example, is like, when I watched the movie the first time, I'm like, I don't know who the fuck this guy is. I've seen him in a bunch of movies, but I believe he is this nerd. I believe that these character actors in the background are these people. Like, when I watch the movie, I come into it, and they've been living their life, and now I'm in this middle sequence where I'm watching it, and then when I leave, they're going to continue to exist. That's what a great movie is. A great movie is made where you get a glimpse into something, and it reflects life back at you, and again, you see yourselves in the characters. The movie has to be driven by words in the script. Too many movies lose the dialogue, and it's not just dialogue, but it's the way the characters breathe. If scripture is God breathes, then movies are human beings breathing. We live and breathe, as Jim says. We live and die, and death not ends it. Anyway, so he's so much fun in it. Like, and we get a glimpse into this life, and we see ourselves in it, and it provides some sort of truthful prism into an aspect of life and what could be and what hasn't been, and we feel the lack of it, as they say in The Thin Red Line. And so Twister is very, very solid. It's a really good movie. The parts, the fact that they save themselves, like, the thing people pay attention to in the movie is the fact that they run into the barn, and there's all the, like, sharp-edged instruments all around, all the farm accoutrement, and it's all flying around them, and they could get decapitated or whatever. But that's not really what's happening. The thing that they're really doing is they're running into a place where they think they can be safe, because the farm is where the family makes their living, and they are in touch with the earth. And all of a sudden, the sky opens up and takes everything away. And they've attached themselves. He takes off his belt, and they hang on to the gas lines that, go into the earth. And that gives them a kind of grounding. They're literally grounded from the Twister, but they're also sort of spiritually grounded in a good way, where the two of them survived the tornado, and they've survived together. And that shows that they're going to survive the tornado of life. So if things are physically bad on the outside, and they can deal with that, and they can come to terms with who they are, and that they're not selfish, and they can devote themselves to each other, then hopefully they can make a life together. And that's why the movie's good, because it has a happy ending where there's a family. Remember the scene where they go to like Aunt May's house or whatever, and they get all the food and they're washing up. But you notice that Aunt May is alone. They end up as a kind of surrogate family that she gets to see every once in a while. But the point of showing that in the movie is that this is not who Helen Hunt's character wants to be in life, or we don't want that for her. We want her in a house with Bill Paxton, and we want them to have children. We want them to be a family, so that the surrogate family of the people that he's older than, that he leads in the movie, they're not really his children. And one day, hopefully, he can have real children with her, and they can live a real life. So that's my Twister analysis, and that's why I think it's a really good movie. Another movie that I watched over the break was that's totally different is the Costa Gavras movie Missing, and this is from 1982, and it's about the September 11th, 1973 Operation Condor in Chile with Pinochet. And it has Sissy Spacek, again, who's appearing in my friend Caroline's podcast. And it has the great Jack Lemmon. Now, this movie was made and kind of comes out at a time when movies like The Boys from Brazil were coming out. Boys from Brazil is about Mengele and the network of paperclip Nazis in South America. And it has Steve Guttenberg, of all people, at the beginning of the movie. Now, this is also the same thing that happens in Crocodile Dundee. The movie begins with a naive, earnest journalist who goes and takes pictures or records something that he shouldn't. And so when I watched the movie, here's what happens in the film. Okay. When I watched the film, I knew from the cover of the movie that, and here's what happens. Spoiler. I knew. Is it a spoiler? I knew that this guy was going to be a journalist. He was going to take pictures of CIA involvement in the Pinochet regime. They were going to go under lockdown. The coup was going to happen. He was going to disappear. He was going to be one of the desaparecidos, one of the disappeared ones. And Jack Lemmon's character, I didn't know anything about the movie. I knew Jack Lemmon's character was going to come up. He was probably going to be the dad. He was going to be looking for his son, and they would never find him. And the only thing I got wrong was that instead of being one of the disappeared ones who was thrown out of a helicopter over the Tierra del Fuego, they ended up taking him away. They ended up shooting him, and we never see that in the film. But they ended up shooting him in the football stadium in Santiago. And it's a really good movie because we see a really, I think, truthful glimpse into CIA operations in Chile and how Jack Lemmon's character gets where he does in the movie, because they never say what he does, but he's clearly a Wall Street guy, and he goes down there, and so his connections with the government through a series of people lead him to finally finding out what happened to his son. But there's one point in the movie where he says, just tell me what happened. I don't care if he's been tortured. I don't care if he's been killed. Just whatever it is, just tell me what happened so that he'll get some closure. But the difficult part, and this is a thing that is, I think, much more truthful about these types of operations, is the chaos of it. What you are left to assume. And he's even, every time they meet with the embassy, they got a general there, and then there's another guy, and you know that there's actually a reverse interview. So instead of him talking to the people in the embassy and he's getting information from them, they're actually getting information from him. They keep asking Sissy Spacek for a list of the people that he talked to so they can go check on him and do some further investigation. She's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving a list. Those people are going to end up dead, and they do. And Jack Lemmon's character says basically that, why don't you give them the list? Don't you trust in the government? Don't you trust there's this thing? And he says it to Sissy Spacek, and then one of the characters says it at the end, basically that this is a way of life. You know, your way of life in America is very expensive. It's expensive in terms of all of the things that intelligence and all these people are doing on the outside to lead you to have this good life. And there is some truth in that. But the real truth is that all of the problems are created out of that and creates more problems, especially when you are living off blood and subterfuge and lies. And there's one thing that I cannot stand, the stench of lies. A snail crawling along the edge of a straight razor. That's my dream. It's my nightmare, these neighborhoods. So, Jack Lemmon kind of gets, he wakes up by the end of the movie and realizes that everything that he thought about life in America was a lie because he's actually affected by it in a personal way. Sissy Spacek in the movie represents a kind of Joan Didion character who seems at the beginning quite naive and ends up being pretty woken up to what's happened through the thing, but she's awake through a kind of 60s, a kind of 60s boomer version of where she can get the truth. And that is a combination of the Ohio River, sir. That is from being on site, but also from learning everything through through a curated media. And she's basically learned that her husband, who she thinks is this great investigative journalist, and who, you know, this guy, as if that even happens. Right? I mean, clearly, when you find the thing, you know what's going to happen to you. And the fact that all these people are playing all these different games in the movie, and the fact that the movie ends up still with there's no real closure. I mean, because he's finally given his son's coffin at the end of the movie, and it's like trashed. So there's no real closure. There's a kind of simulated closure at the end of the film, but it is pretty reflective of the way that the operations work. And Costa Gavras is particularly adept at this. Costa Gavras, like Cosmatos, also has a son who is a filmmaker. His son is Romain Gavras, who directed the film. I think he directed Athena. He had to have done that. If you haven't seen Athena, I would recommend you watch the movie Athena. I think it's on Netflix still. I got this from beautiful Claire from Canada, who put this movie on to me, and it's about French riots that really mimic the 2020 chaos, and also the ongoing chaos of what's happening in France, and not just mimic it, but like give a real sort of truthful, visceral idea of what's happening in the world. And Romain Gavras did that. Romain Gavras also was the director of a bunch of the Justice music videos. You remember Justice? I still love Justice. DANCE. I think they did the DANCE video. That's some good French touch. So what else do we have to cover tonight? I think that's about it. But you guys, please consider supporting me. You can do that through yeah. Okay, she just texted me. There you go. I'll get her back with that. So you can support me, of course, through Cash App, PayPal, Venmo. That is. Oh, I didn't cover C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair. Let's briefly talk about that. The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis is a kind of antidote to all of this, all of the Joan Didion stuff, all the missing stuff. So Silver Chair is one of the 7 books in the Narnia series, and I read the don't judge a book by its cover bullshit. When I was in 5th grade, I read Silver Chair, The Magician's Nephew, Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and The Dawn Treader. And the silver chair, the cover of the silver chair, this was the 70s version of the book with the cover with Rillian striking the silver chair, really struck me. It really, there's something deep and primordial and way down deep in my spirit with C.S. Lewis's books, especially Magician's Nephew. I can't even look at the cover of Magician's Nephew without feeling this sense of sort of weird dread. I remember being really scared of the book when I was in 5th grade. Like, it really affected me. It really scared me. And I went from there into the Lloyd Alexander series. I covered the Book of Three. I covered the Book of Three about 2 years ago. And the Book of Three is really, I think, the Lloyd Alexander series, the High King, the Black Cauldron, etc., are an American version of the sort of the Mabinogian, the Welsh, the kind of Celtic Arthurian tale that is great for kids. So I don't often do this, but if I were going to recommend a book, if you are a parent and you're going to recommend a book for your kids, obviously I would start with C.S. Lewis. But Lloyd Alexander's series is really, really good. It's adventure, and I was really also deeply affected by those books. I've always loved Arthurian. I've never covered the Arthurian tales, and I need to because I have a sponsored stream on Arthurian tales. I need to cover those, and I've really put it off for a while. I covered Outremer and the Templars, which is a kind of parallel with Arthurian chivalric literature, especially Crécy de Troyes. But I've got my whole main section of my library, my most valuable section to me of my library is my Arthurian section. And when I went to England the first time and walked across it in 2000, it was January 2001. I walked across England and I was going on a sort of Arthurian quest of different castles. And we could do a John Borman Excalibur stream. But C.S. Lewis, they're going to remake the C.S. Lewis series, and I do think that it will be better. I know people are probably pretty hesitant about that because of the director, but I think it will be good because there will be something more about the sense of the kind of childlike innocence and whimsy, as Mersh says. With this series, I hope. And the movie came out when I was in grad school in Belfast, and I told you guys that I was at they had the Narnia premiere in Belfast because C.S. Lewis is from Belfast, and Narnia is kind of set, the Mourne Mountains kind of provide a backdrop for Narnia. And so I was doing my grad work at Queen's in Belfast, and I was with my friend David walking through the quad. We couldn't walk through the main Lanyon building because the Queen, look at that, that's the Queen, that's Her Majesty right over there. She was inside the glass, right on the other side of the glass, and I thought, what? That's Queen Elizabeth? There she is. That's the Queen right there. Right, where are you at, lads? What's the crack? And we said, my friend David said, what's the crack here? And we couldn't walk right through there. And so, anyway, they didn't do the film any justice because it is too CGI'd. I mean, that's really the issue, and that we were just talking about that with Twister. But The Silver Chair is a fantastic movie because it concerns the cousins of the original group that's in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we have Jill, and basically she is getting bullied at her school, and she ends up in Narnia. And this is, you need to read this as an adult because you go back and read. It's obvious the Christian allegorical overtones in the book are very powerful. She ends up on the mountain. So where do people go to talk to God? They go to the mountain. She's up on the mountain, and she meets Aslan. And Aslan tells her, basically, she gets thirsty. She's she asks for a drink of water from this cool stream, and Aslan is there, and he's terrifying. He's full of, you're full of awe in looking at him. And she says, he says, if you want to drink from the water, all you have to do is ask, just drink. And she says, can you promise that you won't eat me up if I go to drink from the water? And he says, I'm not going to promise that. And that's because you can't put God to the test. He offers you the drink, you just have to drink it. And also that, she's talking to the lion of the world. So Aslan, of course, blows her on her breath off the mountain, and he comes to her in dreams, and she's given a quest, and she has 4 things that she has to repeat. And just like in life, we're given everything by God, but we live and we forget, or we get sidetracked. Lewis talked about this in Screw Tape Letters that I covered. We sort of get sidetracked with these things, and he ends up coming to her in her dreams and telling her what the 4 signs that she has to obey in order to get back to super chat your money to send BLA back to Belfast for a Queen's University stream. Hey, yeah, do that. I the only reason that I didn't stay for a PhD was because I got into drama school, and I don't regret that. But I haven't been back to Belfast since 2006, and I should go back because one of my friends, also from Queens, is the one who she's the showrunner. She created that show Dairy Girls. I've talked about that before. And now she's a member of the Royal Society. He's a Billy boy. King Billy on the wall. Sandy Row. So she ends up meeting a cast of characters. They get into a storm. They get into a rift in the earth, and they end up in the underworld under the city, and Prince Caspian is now the king, and there is essentially a story of mind control, because Rillian is the prince who is tied to the silver chair, and he basically is under the control of this witch, and all of the gnomes and all these characters, all the earthmen, are mining under the city, reminiscent of J.R.R. Tolkien, of course, but are mining under the city to destroy it. And finally, the final sign is that he will do something in the name of Aslan, and so he ends up being the redeeming prince. And what's great about the book is that, is there a movie? Is there a movie of this? I don't think there's a movie of Silverchair, but she ends up being blown back into the world, and Aslan comes with her and sits with his back to the world with his face into Narnia, and we see that that it shows the crossover of Aslan. That Aslan is ending up the master of both worlds, and so she will one day return to Narnia, but she's been given this sort of strength for her life surviving bullies, and has ended up being a hero who uses the holy terror of Aslan to find inspiration in her life. And it's a really fantastic book. I'm going to go back and read The Magician's Nephew, even though I'm still scared of it. I'm a 44-year-old man still scared of Aslan. Cheesy boy, I said, yeah, bro, there is a movie on the BBC. It's fire. I didn't know that. I'll check it out. I like the movie Shadowlands with Anthony Hopkins about C.S. Lewis. Remember that C.S. Lewis's wife's ex-husband is that occult guy who wrote the book on Houdini that I covered 2 years ago. Go back and watch that. And he also wrote Nightmare Alley, which I also covered. So isn't that weird? I'm talking about the silver chair. So anyway, I will do a full analysis of the Magician's Nephew when I get to that, and also probably a complete deep dive into C.S. Lewis, into Narnia, after I've read all the books. So that'll about do it for us tonight. Let's go back to Sabrina's super chat here because you asked a good question. Based, how can you talk about Val without mentioning his Christopher Knight role in Real Genius at his peak cuteness? LOL. Thank you. I appreciate you, Sabrina. And Real Genius is a fantastic movie because, first of all, it's a DARPA movie. It's about DARPA. And Val Kilmer plays a kind of, he's a lovable misfit genius in the movie, surrounded by all these nerds. And there's something to take from the movie, which is that, and I talked about this with Jamie, I think that one of the secrets to life is not just beyond being likable, but is to know things about people through meeting them in real life. To know, to remember what they do, to remember what they're good at, what they did, things they like, their music. This sounds like something a robot would think about when trying to imitate a human being. But this is something that is essentially human because, you know, you remember the details about people, and it's the details that really make for a great relationship with people. And so I think that there's something in the movie we don't get our moral lessons from movies, but there's something in the movie about knowing and being around all types of people. And I've always been very at home with, with like when I was in school, for instance, with being friends with I was friends with nerds. I was friends with athletes. I was a drama kid, but I also played sports, and I think that probably a lot of people in here already have that. You're already very good at. It's like when you go to work somewhere and you're friends with the lunch ladies, but you're also friends with the old dudes, and you're friends with the new people. You just gotta kind of fit in. So, and thank you, Matt, for that $50, that super chat. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Sabrina, for that $10 super chat. Let's see if we also got any other support here. Thank you to Jason, of course, for that $10 PayPal. Thank you to John Connor for that $10. Thank you to Ethan. And also, hey, thank you to, thank you to JG for that $7. Really appreciate you. On PayPal, thank you. So I don't see a comment. So if you did leave a comment, please forgive me. Thank you, JG. Really appreciate you. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Please help me to get these numbers up and to go to my friend Major Label, Paul's podcast at Major Label Debut. Tell him that I sent you. Go to places. Tell him I sent you. Please help me to get on some streams. Help me to get these numbers up. Give me some rewatches. Also, make sure you can grab some memberships. I will be doing many more member streams. I will be doing probably shorter but more frequent analyses of movies and books. We will pick up next time with whatever. I don't know what we're going to do next time, but I hope everybody has a great week. Thank you to everybody for being here. I really appreciate you. It's almost Easter, and it's getting hot as heck here. It's actually cool and misty and rainy today. I went out and stood in the rain for 5 minutes earlier, just getting soaked. But I was up there in upstate New York, and I will say this. I'll say this last thing. This is a beautiful country. We have the United States is a wonderful country. If you're outside the United States, I hope you can come here sometime. And God, this is such a beautiful country. It's so big. And it really put it into perspective just how far we drove. We were down south, driving further down south. Thank you to Michael H. for that $2. Really appreciate you. And we have a beautiful, beautiful country. It's so big, and there are so many people. One of the things that I really liked about this trip that I did was that there's a thing, everyone notices about the kind of post-modern malaise and ennui and aesthetic tourism that we get, which is the gray box. The gray box is everywhere. All the suburbs are gray boxes. Everything, even the Wendy's from the 90s that used to have the sunroom and and you get places made of brick. In the 2000s, they started making more things out of brick, and it was like, at least around here especially, more brick stuff, less vinyl siding and all that stuff. And then it turned into the gray box. So everywhere's a gray box. Gray everywhere. Everything's gray. Look at your damn laptop. It's gray. Everything's gray. Your whole life is gray. And it was all yellow. Different color. But what I noticed on this trip is fewer gray boxes. There were a few on the highway, but I noticed, especially the route that we took, because we took, especially on the way back, we took a route through, basically a scenic route that ended up being quicker and was much more full of the fruit of human life. And we went through all these towns in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and New York that were full of family-owned places, non-corporate places, and it was really fantastic. Like, I haven't seen that in a long time. Everywhere you go is like you get a Motel 6 and a Marriott, and that's fine, but this was like we saw roadside motels, restaurants with family names, restaurants that weren't fast food and all that stuff, and even the gas stations we stopped at were like, I haven't seen gas stations that weren't Exxons or whatever for forever. And everyone that I came across was nice and sweet and normal. And just, I love that this country still has, that most of it, despite all the things we see, is full of people who want to make a life with their family and they enjoy time with them and they want to go out and go to other places where people own and give them business and go to see sites. And people just want to be, people are very kind and generous and normal. And despite what we see everywhere, and it was so much fun. I'd never seen the Great Lakes before. When we got up to Lake Erie, I looked and it was like, it was like the ocean in front of me, and the wind and the rain and the mist was just rejuvenating. I felt like a new human being. I can't even tell you how awesome it was. It was so good. And I just felt real love and real, God's creation is fucking so, excuse my language, is so majestic. We went to Niagara Falls, and I've seen pictures of it so many times, and it's one of these places I haven't been. And Canada is right there across the thing, and you see Niagara Falls, and it's like God's footprint in the earth or something, and it's just this huge waterfall, and it is the river leading up to it was all ice chunks, and then Lake Erie was frozen almost. They had icebreakers out there in April, and I imagine getting there imagine being like the first person coming to the New World, and you get up to Niagara Falls and you're led up there. And I just thought the first thing I would think is, this is mine. This is mine. I'm putting my house right here. This is it. And, I'm from the South. So I lived in New York City for a year, but I don't do much up north. And I really woke up to how beautiful it was. I mean, Jerry took us around this waterfall in the middle of town and around this park, and it was just the North did something that the South hasn't done in many places, which is they didn't tear down the old buildings. They kept a lot of we went to this ice cream shop from like 1700, and it was all old wood, and it's right there overlooking this, like there's like, you imagine a mill, and there's a waterfall, and there's new buildings all around it, but it's like old and new. There's a good juxtaposition in the architecture. Boston also did this pretty well. Richmond did not do this well, because we have the oldest building in Richmond is from the 1600s, and it's the Edgar Allan Poe Museum. But a lot of the city they tore down. A lot of the big the big majestical buildings they took down and made way for a modern city along the way. And it was just very good to see that up north, and it was really awesome. I see what Jerry loves about Buffalo. It has so much character. And dude, we took this tour of this naval yard, and the old man boomer docent that gave us the tour at the beginning, like he was like, they made 400 ships in 30 months over there at Bethlehem Steel. I mean, it's fucking incredible. There's so much stuff. The factories that they had are so big. I mean, this country used to make everything. We really just we made everything, and it was just really cool, man. It's really, really cool. This is a great country. I can't wait to get up there. I just want to go there all the time now. I want to go to Lake Michigan. I want to go visit the Wilsons. I want to go see Chase in Milwaukee. I really want to get up there again. So hopefully we'll do that soon. And anyway, so you guys do some traveling. Do some traveling in your own country. Do some traveling here. Go see your family and friends, and hope everybody has a good Easter. We'll see each other before then. I will report back to you after this week and tell you how the Sam show goes. I'm sure it's going to be fun. Shouts out to everybody here. Shouts out. There's Mella right there. There's Christopher. There's Kit. There's Crispy. Thank you to Sabrina Klon. There's everybody in the chat. Thank you to Jason, of course. And I saw Jethro earlier. Thank you to Real John Connor. Everybody who's here tonight, please make sure you give it a like. Share my stream. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Go to this my friend's website. I mean, go to his meanbeard.com. That's his reviews. You can go to his website, and you can also check out my friend Paul writes music reviews for Under the Radar and a bunch of stuff. Shouts out to Baxter, my friend out there, and God bless and rest in peace to his dad. Shouts out to everybody out there. I love you. Thank you, Michael H. Everybody, I love you. Thank you. Please give me a rewatch. Tell me what you think of these movies. Tell me what you think of Twister. And also, rest in peace, Val Kilmer. Really going to miss all of his work. He provided a great body of work for us to delve back into. He's given me endless hours of enjoyment watching his movies and really affected me as an actor and as a person. So I really love that. So check that out. And here's Rooks G and his New Age of the Shadow Moon. Please go to Rooks G's New Age of the Shadow Moon, his channel ROXG, and tell him that I sent you. Everybody, if you want to support me, you can always do that. I love you. And I will see you next time. Listen, was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough, love you. Keep on living. Peace. Peace, y'all. Love you. Peace.